At least it's a pause, and it means that the tensions will not escalate in the foreseeable future. But whether or not the two sides can reach an agreement, a far-reaching agreement, remains to be seen. Because twice before, the U.S. announced that there had been an agreement, at least Secretary Ross of the Commerce Department, Secretary Mnuchin of the Treasury Department announced deals with the Chinese, only to have the president say, no, I'm not bound by those. And then most recently, we had what we thought was an agreement, only to have the Chinese say, no, they're not satisfied with it either. So at least I think they're going to go back to the bargaining table. I would not expect any agreement soon. There's some really, really tough issues that remain to be resolved.
Mr. Ambassador, so you don't expect anything soon, but game it out for me. How long do you think this is going to take to get a substantive deal?
Well, I think there'll be pressure on both sides. The Fed has estimated that with the most recent tariffs that have already been put into place, including in May, where tariffs were raised to the full 25% on virtually half of the goods coming from China, that's costing the American household on average $800 a year. And of course, as U.S. companies start moving their supply chains or trying to move their supply chains from China to outside of China, let's say to Vietnam and Southeast Asia, there'll be some pressure on the Chinese government to reach a resolution so that they can keep a lot of this manufacturing in China. So there's pressure on both sides, but there's also politics involved. The Chinese cannot appear to be weak. And certainly the president does not want to appear to be caving into the Chinese. The Chinese want all the tariffs to be removed as part of the deal. The United States is going to want to keep some of those tariffs in place as a method of enforcement. So a lot of tough issues still separating the two.
Ambassador, Wall Street was surprised to see Huawei as part of the, I guess, discussions or agreements this weekend. The fact that U.S. suppliers can continue to send their components, their chips, et cetera, to the Chinese tech company. How do you see it? Is it something that more broadly enters the trade talks from here on out?
Well, Huawei certainly will be part of the trade talks, especially some of the more severe sanctions imposed against Huawei, the criminal prosecutions against Huawei and some of the top executives. Some of the sanctions on Huawei really didn't make sense in the beginning. Why stop American companies from selling, for instance, the glass that goes into the very cheap cell phones that Huawei produces for consumers around the world, or some of the chips that are used in the cell phones? It's another thing, of course, on whether or not U.S. companies can buy Huawei equipment for their cellular networks or even for 5G. And the intelligence agencies of America have deep concerns about the security risk posed by Huawei's very advanced, sophisticated equipment. But when the president interjected Huawei and said that Huawei as a whole constitutes a security threat to America, for then the president to turn right around and say, well, we can still sell equipment to this security threat, that doesn't make much sense. And it's sending mixed messages to all of our allies when we're trying to convince our allies not to use Huawei equipment. So here we are allowing U.S. companies to sell equipment to Huawei, but we also don't want our allies to be buying that equipment. It really sends a lot of mixed messages.